Totoro, 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 and that's about all I've got.
It wasn't even worth you looking it up before we left.
Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where today, after years and years and years of alluding to it, we're finally talking about one of the most artsy of the animation studios that still works today. Ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between, we're talking about a Ghibli movie.
So, 38 years of Ghibli classics has led to a lot of things, but mainly we can't talk about Ghibli without talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Hayao Miyazaki.
So, the idea of the auteur filmmaker, the one person at the top of the pyramid who gets final say on everything that comes out of a certain project, is a rarity in the medium of animation. Granted, you'll occasionally get like a Brad Bird, a Steven Hillenburg, a Richard Williams, but the idea of an auteur in the animation field is very rare because animation is a lot to take on by yourself.
It is a very collaborative medium. If you're doing it by yourself, then it's probably going to take a really long time. Hence why Richard Williams and Steven Hillenburg have not really done a lot of stuff in the way. And also some auteurs are just up. Let's be honest, some auteurs in the animation industry are just up their own ass, and then you get a John Kay, and nobody wants that.
But if you ever want to lose your faith in the arts, then just look up what happened to The Thief and the Cobbler and how Richard Williams' entire life's work just kind of got thrown away. Anyway, Hayao Miyazaki is definitely one of those few auteurs. He is a person who definitely has a vision, executes it to the best of his abilities, and occasionally will overwork his employees because that's just the way that the animation industry sometimes can be. I wish it didn't have to be, but that's just the way it is sometimes.
That being said, no animator in Japan has ever has probably really been more prolific in the animation field than Hayao Miyazaki. And especially when Studio Ghibli came into the scene, it has become so synonymous in Western culture with animated feature films that there are dozens of animated feature films from Japan that people will lump in with the Ghibli stuff.
And it's just a thing where these movies by this studio are so iconic and so influential that they are influences to some of the most prolific directors working today, whether it be Wes Anderson and Pete Docter or Guillermo del Toro. Even Steven Spielberg counts Studio Ghibli movies as an influence. And if you watch the movies, it's kind of easy to see why. These are artsy, little, quiet pieces that you don't usually see in the animation field, especially today.
Yeah, it's the kind of things that you don't expect a little kid to sit through.
And of course, we've watched every movie Hayao Miyazaki has directed for Studio Ghibli, and of course, the man seems to miss. Some misses are less impactful, but nonetheless, still decently sized hits.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of weird that when it comes to what his sensibilities are, mostly he goes with the weirdest kinds of fairy tales.
It is a very eclectic mix. The first two movies of his are these high concept sci-fi fantasy epics, and then suddenly My Neighbor Totoro.
And then somewhere in there he created Spirited Away, which for the longest time we only knew as that one movie that beat Lilo and Stitch at the Oscars that year.
And then we had Howl's Moving Castle, and then 10 years ago we thought Hayao Miyazaki was hanging it up with The Wind Rises.
I mean, we weren't really convinced that Miyazaki was actually going to retire because
I don't think anybody was.
As far as we were aware at the time, and as we have figured out more and more as we've researched the man, he seems to be the Brett Favre of Japanese animation. In the sense that he says that he's done, is hanging it up, and then immediately gets back on the horse. in no other ways that Brett Favre is noteworthy right now.
Yeah. But that is the case today, where we see what, for at least a very brief amount of time, was set to be his next last film ever.
The Boy and the Heron, or if you're of the more of the Japanese purist, How Do You Live?
And it is a film that has had like no hype because they don't want it to.
The hype is, it's the new Studio Ghibli movie after years of thinking we were never going to get another Studio Ghibli movie.
Yeah.
We had shorts, and we had Earwig and the Witch, which was a TV movie in Japan and got a little limited release here in America.
Thank you, COVID.
But for a long time, no one thought that Studio Ghibli was going to come back. We thought that with Miyazaki's retirement, that Studio Ghibli was effectively dead with when Marnie was there, which I still to this day think is probably my favorite Ghibli movie.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't seen them all, but I've seen enough of them to be like, I think it's like when Marnie was there, where Kiki's Delivery Service, Porco Rosso.
That would be a weird thing. Would be a weird thing to say.
I sound so sacrilegious putting those all together like that, but that's my opinion.
On top of Spirited Away and Howl, no less.
Fight me. But for a long time, we thought that Studio Ghibli basically died with Miyazaki's retirement. But then, a few years ago, Hayao Miyazaki announced that he was getting to work on a new movie after his working on a short revitalized his want to work as Eric on his next movie. And so, How Do You Live was this movie that he created, essentially, as far as we know, as a way of informing his grandchildren that one day he is going to die.
And as a little bit of backstory, we started off the year by losing our grandfather.
So this is going to be coming at us from a kind of personal note. But then again, for Miyazaki, apparently there was a major story change when one of his producers unfortunately passed away. So this is apparently going to be coming from that moment. Apparently, originally this was supposed to be a little bit more autobiographical. Then his producer passed away, and he decided to come at it from that angle.
So it's been a long process making this. Obviously, COVID impacted production a little bit because they still do because Ghibli movies are still hand drawn, and a hand drawn animation is a little more difficult to do when you can't go into a physical office and work on it.
Granted, for the most part, as far as we can tell, they're at least digitally drawing them as hand drawn, but they're not like drawing everything on a piece of paper. But it's also just a case of they need to like complete shots and stuff like that. COVID took its toll on this as much as it did on most other movies.
Yeah, but at the same time, this is just a thing where it's kind of exciting, but also a little scary to be coming into a movie this blind. We've watched we got a trailer.
Because the American release got a trailer because the Japanese release did not.
The Japanese release did not get a trailer. They did not see anything from the movie. They only got like a promotional image. But whereas we got a poster that we kind of see, that we see just a character from, we got a different title than the Japanese release, and we got 2 trailers that only really show interesting shots and nothing more.
Which we have only seen each of once.
Yeah.
Because we are going into this with that much integrity, damn it.
Yeah, we're going into this as blind as we possibly can. Obviously, we're excited to see this, but at the same time, we don't know what this movie is.
And I think it's time to talk about the format in which we are seeing this movie.
Yes.
So, on the internet, for pretty much as long as anime has been readily available, there has been a long-standing battle over who is better. The people who watch anime with the original Japanese audio track subtitled for English, or the people who watch a new English audio track created by an American dubbing team. Sub versus dub. A battle as old as internet forums themselves. And we are watching the dub.
Yes.
So,
it is nothing against subs. This is just the way we personally prefer watching our anime.
And it's mostly because, for the record, I will watch a sub if it's all that's available. I am not against reading. I am perfectly fine with reading my movie. But when it comes to dubs, when it comes to anime, usually I'm doing something else while I'm watching. And also, there's just a lot of anime voice actors that I'm a fan of. Most of them aren't in this movie, but I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah.
But as for who is in the English dub of this movie, Ghibli movies have had quite the track record for star-studded casts.
And this time around is no exception.
So we've got Christian Bale returning after his role as Hayao, playing the most Keanu Reeves sounding version of himself I had ever heard. Willem Dafoe, Dave Bautista, Florence Pugh, Gemma Chan, and making his voice acting debut, Robert Pattinson as the titular Heron.
Yes. So this is an interesting cast, and obviously we got two Batman and a Joker in this, because we have Mark Hamill as well, and it's very interesting. It's going to be very interesting. Again, we know next to nothing. Nothing. We've heard Willem Dafoe's voice in the trailer, and we've heard Robert Pattinson's voice in the trailer.
And of course, Robert Pattinson decided to go all out for what is his first voice role in anything, and he does not sound like Robert Pattinson.
Not that we really have any kind of handle on what Robert Pattinson sounds like anyway.
But it's just going to be... This is an interesting thing. We're jumping into this as blind as we possibly can. We know nothing about what the plot is. We know nothing about anything that's going to happen in this. And all we know is that since it's a Studio Ghibli movie, it's probably going to look amazing. And because it's a Hayao Miyazaki movie, it's probably going to be artsy as all hell.
Yes, we know, having watched through all of the Miyazaki catalog from Ghibli that we have available, because we have Max, we have been able to spot a bunch of his motifs, so we kind of have an idea of the kind of stuff we will absolutely be seeing.
But we don't know in what way we're going to be seeing them. Like, flights is a big thing with Miyazaki. Are we going to get on a plane, or are we riding on the back of a heron?
I mean, that one's probably a little more obvious than others. Nature versus technology is probably going to factor in somewhere.
The pacifism will probably be a thing, depending on what he's doing.
And there's probably also going to be some and based on what little else we know about it, there's probably going to be some stuff about spirituality and grief.
And yeah, all we can say right now is this is the latest installment of a career that has spanned decades and will probably end when the guy behind it is laying down, just kind of slumps down over his drawing table one last time.
I mean, he's 82, but if he really is taking care of himself, he might be able to hold on for a little while longer.
Supposedly, he's working on his next movie right now.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the next thing for Miyazaki will be, but all we know is that this is out, and apparently it is his weirdest movie ever. Which is saying something, considering the fact that his Little Mermaid riff was weird, and yet the movie with a pig-headed World War I pilot was the normal one.
That's the most normal movie of a director's career of a...
That's the one with the 3-act structure and everything like that.
It has a 3-act structure, it has a plot, it has normal stuff. There's not like monsters or anything popping up. There is...
Trippy imagery is to an absolute minimum. Somehow the most normal one is the pig one. Because you see, the pig is a metaphor.
It was the one that we thought, that going into, we thought was probably going to be one of the weirdest.
And it ended up being the most normal. What is in your head, Hayao Miyazaki? What is in your head?
So, on that note, I think we should get ready to go get this thing into high gear.
Yep, so we will see you guys after the jump. Alright, so because of the way that this movie was marketed, or the lack of marketing, we figured that we should probably warn you guys in advance, the way we did back when we did Spider-Man No Way Home.
So now, granted, we're probably not going to spill too much, but this is just a precautionary spoiler warning because,
especially since we're going to be getting deep into certain aspects of this movie, that's because this movie did not have proper trailers until the American release was announced. We are going to have to get into stuff that was not brought up in early press material. So, if you want to go in as clean as possible, just go to the theater now, find a screening, or wait till it's on streaming. Come back to this video. Everyone else, we will give you a few minutes to just kind of wait it out. All right.
Yeah.
Now that everybody should have clicked off, it's time for our favorite game. Mason and Spencer pretend they're more pretentious than they actually are.
Hooray!
So, this is a mood piece.
Yeah.
This movie is very much a mood piece. Logic and story are very much secondary to how the movie makes you feel about certain elements.
This is David Fincher directing an A24 film levels of art.
So, because this is a movie that will give you a lot of lore, but it will not dwell on it.
Yes.
There will be strange characters and creations and everything like that, but it will not spend a good 2 minutes of the movie explaining the lore. It will just simply let the creatures exist and hope that the audience gets it.
The characters themselves don't dwell on any kind of absurds that anybody else will, so it just kind of helps you to expect that you, as the audience, will not dwell on certain oddities as well. And with that in mind, it is a capital A art movie, so something to keep in mind if you're planning on seeing it.
And the English dub that we saw is very much one of those dubs, like we said, where it is a very star-packed cast. Like Christian Bale as the main character's father, who is doing somewhere between a low-rent John F. Kennedy impression and the voice he did in Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah. And then Willem Dafoe has a very small role in the midway point of the movie.
But it is very much very Willem Dafoe is perfect for this part. Why do we cast anyone else? Parts. In fact, one of the things I like about Studio Ghibli dubs is that somehow they find actors who shockingly fit the look of the character. When Mark Hamill's character shows up on screen, you can see Mark Hamill's facial structure in the character's design.
Now, obviously that wasn't meant to be a thing, because obviously this was made for Japan. The dub was done later, but after the movie was completed. But
obviously, I'm not saying that when they were designing these characters, they had certain actors in mind. What I am saying is that it is just kind of wonderfully shocking how well cast these characters are, that they could have probably played them in live action.
Except for one, because there is because the most shocking casting of the entire movie is the titular heron in the film, played by Robert Pattinson, who in a movie with Willem Dafoe and a guy who's played the Joker in it, he gives probably the most Joker-esque voice in the entire movie.
It really shows how good at this particular voice and how deep into this character Robert Pattinson was, that at times I was almost second-guessing myself and being like, wait, is Willem Dafoe or Mark Hamill playing the heron and not Robert Pattinson? I was told Robert Pattinson was the heron. But then Willem Dafoe and Mark Hamill actually show up, and it's like, okay, Robert Pattinson just might be one of the greatest voice actors of his generation.
Yeah, like if he wasn't a multi-million-dollar movie star, he would be making bank in the voice acting world, or whatever bank in the
as much bank as you can make as a voice actor.
whatever bank in the voice actor world is.
He'd be doing 1 billion anime dubs and fun cartoons, because my god, was this voice amazing. Even though the character design seemed to imply, did they want Danny DeVito instead?
Possibly, but it's a thing of it's a voice that is so different from his own, and he can do so many different emotions with it. He can act in this voice.
He goes from sinister to weird comic genie from Aladdin effect in so many different scenes. It's kind of amazing.
It's a thing of people don't realize about voice acting. A lot of people just immediately assume that, oh, I can just do a silly voice and then suddenly I'm a voice actor. But you gotta realize that you have to be able to go in and out of that voice on a dime and actually act in that voice. And he can do all of those things. He can maintain the voice, he can act in it, he can do all of this kind of stuff with it. So it just kind of makes you wonder what other talents he has under the surface of all that.
Just please don't sing again. I really, every time I think of those Twilight songs, it just makes me.
Yeah.
Anyway, now that we've talked about something that only the English-speaking American audiences would actually like, let's talk about the animation and just how gorgeous it is to see a hand-drawn animated film on the big screen for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, it's so weird seeing it. We've never seen a Studio Ghibli movie on the big screen, so seeing it on the big screen is just kind of insane.
And this is just such a, we keep saying, this is a mood piece. Characters shapeshift and walk through flames and move around in strange ways. And this is some of the best integration of hand-drawn and CGI I have ever seen in a Studio Ghibli movie. First 5 minutes of this movie, when a character is walking up a set of CGI stairs, you almost don't notice it.
Yeah.
And that's just amazing. And obviously the character designs are creative, and there's all kinds of things. It's amazing that there are whole swaths of the cast that are birds that transform into people.
And you have these amazing creative designs to them.
Like the main villain of this movie ends up being a parakeet, a big muscular parakeet voiced by Dave Bautista, and it's just such a weirdly comedic design. Yet somehow how he carries himself with this weight to him that just makes the entire character seem all the better for it. And obviously it does have deep philosophical stuff to it. It very much grapples with the idea of grief. Though one of the weirder things about this is the lack of flight in it.
Yeah.
For a Miyazaki movie.
We do see some plane stuff, obviously, but it's Miyazaki kind of both stretching his legs as a creative, because it has a few of his tricks because it is him throwing a lot of his tricks away. But at the same time, the movie that this most reminds me of is Spirited Away.
It's him going back to that modernized fairy tale that was Spirited Away, and I really think that he's at home when he has this whole world building aspects to play with.
Even if the world itself is not exactly built upon in a way that we fully understand what the purposes of some of this stuff is, but
it could be a cultural thing. Maybe these are potential fantasy worlds that are more prevalent in Japanese fables that we have never heard of. But there's also the fact that Spirited Away was a lot more episodic than this. Spirited Away focuses on a lot of different smaller stories, telling a much bigger story.
Whereas this one around is a lot more of a one long story told. There
are pieces. It is told somewhat in pieces. There are certain elements where it's just like, okay, we're here, now we're here, now we're going to spend the rest of the movie here.
But they better bleed into each other than in Spirited Away, where it was, again, a little more episodic, where it was just like this chunk of the movie's up at this part here. But
I don't know what else to say. The Boy and the Heron is yet another movie that Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki have created in a way that only they could potentially create.
Yeah.
And I humbly await what Miyazaki has to say for his next movie, whether it come very soon or we have to wait another 10 years.
Yeah.
And for right now, I think we can pretty much say that's it for today. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may have thought of The Boy and the Heron, being very careful of spoilers in the comments. And don't forget to tune in next time when the schnozberries taste like schnozberries.